Hello, it is Friday, May 27th, and we are here with day 24 of our 30 2022 conversations.
I think one of the reasons, Penny, it's been a few days since we've talked, is we're still processing the tragedy in Texas. And it seems almost, I don't know, really, really hard to talk about teaching, strategies and teaching ideas when we're still trying to process what's happening in our schools.
Yeah, we talked on Wednesday morning because we had an all-day workshop virtually, the two of us, with teachers. And as we were waiting for teachers to come on, we were just saying that it was so hard to put this aside, all of this grief, this buzzing sense of disbelief over what has happened. And, how can you honor those beautiful children and teachers who lost their lives? I think one thing we said is that we both still believe that literacy has the ability to change the way people think and behave and understand each other, and that that's really important. And as we feel the stress of the teachers that we love and care about, including my daughter, I want to have a way to reach out and in some way help.
Yeah, I know it seems kind of counterintuitive, but I remember when we were getting ready to start the workshop, I was really not feeling doing a workshop. And it was really about an hour into our day where it really actually made me happy that I had teachers to work with. It made me, I don't know if happy is the right word, but I was grateful to have the work to hang on to. And to other teachers who have similar sentiments to talk to. But I really do like your idea that, that it's through literacy, it's through teaching kids to, the empathy that you learn when you read books and when you value each other's cultures and open up the reading and writing so that everybody in the room is valued. I have to hold on to that hope that that's a way that things will make things better.
Yeah, my daughter teaches fifth grade and, felt overwhelmed by how the pictures of the children look so much like her students. And she was feeling like she didn't know what to say. I think many teachers feel that way and didn't get a lot of support from administration. They got a link to Teaching Tolerance. Perhaps this can help. I think leaders are feeling rightfully shocked, like all of us. But I do know of a school where the principal stood outside and greeted every single teacher coming in from the parking lot, then stood in the front of the school and greeted every kid as they came to school. And I think those things, that reaching out matters. That when a kid did approach her and said, what do you think about all this? A kid she'd had 2 years before, she said, I'm scared. And I don't know what it means. I want to protect you all. I want you to know that I would do anything to keep you safe. And I don't know what else we say except that. But I know that for me this morning, it is so present in my thinking that I sit with my notebook and I read poetry. And somehow it brings me back to the physicality of the world, to the sound of the birds outside my window. I'm able to process. I'm not any less sad, but I'm able to put one foot in front of the other.
I haven't processed, I haven't, as we talked right before we came on, I can't look at the pictures of the kids. I can't go there. But like you, and I love the suggestion, that you had, that we spent a little bit of this morning before we came on reading poetry and helping kind of center me again, help center us again. And I think if I were in a classroom today, this is what I would be doing. I would bring in, especially that third poem we're going to share today, and have kids read and write. It reminds me a little bit about when we interviewed Chris Crutcher. He said, you can't avoid it. You have to set up a safe way for kids to process it somehow, right? And I think poetry is really an interesting way to go there.
So, what we thought we would do today is I'm going to start with a book talk just because Hannah told me about this book, Redwood and Ponytail. Have you heard about it, Kelly?
I have not.
So, K.A. Holt, who's written a lot of books, has written this really sweet story of these two girls. One's the cheerleader, kind of stereotype cheerleader, and the other is the super athletic Redwood, because she's super tall, girl in her class. They're both in 7th grade, and they are two voices. So you'd see that novel in verse with the two voices. But what I love is this. There are the three, it's almost like the Greek tragedy with the setup chorus, the chorus of three voices, and it pops in regularly. And so the whole time I'm reading, not only is it this very sweet story of two girls realizing they have these feelings for each other. And what I love is being unafraid to know that and to sit together in the cafeteria and to link their pinky fingers together as they go down the hall. And I want to believe there's a world where that happens and they're not made fun of. But I am here, which means a lot could happen that unfortunately would confirm what happened to so many of the students I taught in same-sex relationships, that there was some kind of pushback. But I think what's interesting is to imagine this as a play instead of just a book. If you had two voices, two kids on stage, and the chorus would come in, it would be really fascinating to see if you propose that, what kids would do with it. So highly recommend, love it. Hannah read it in one night and said, oh my gosh, I got to have this in my room. And I'm sure I will feel the same.
Another one in my cart.
That's right. Spending all your money.
So Penny and I talked a little bit about, where do we turn to for poetry in times like this? And I turned to a book that I actually mentioned in one of our first discussions, maybe 70 discussions ago. And this is a book called Teaching with Fire. And it's a book that is put together that just helps teachers sustain the courage to teach, and you have a school shooting, you have a pandemic, you have book bannings. There's just never been a harder time to be a teacher. And in this book, what they've done is they asked teachers to submit a poem. So on one side is the poem, and then on the other side is the teacher's kind of little rationale for sharing the poem. And this book was published in 2003. And just as my career was taking off with writing my first book, and I included a poem I love called The Gift, which I'm going to read now. And if you have it on your screen, you could, Penny, you could pull it up, right? So this is called The Gift. It's by Lee Young Lee, and it goes like this. To pull the metal splinter from my palm, my father recited a story in a low voice. I watched his lovely face and not the blade. Before the story ended, he'd remove the iron sliver I thought I'd die from. I can't remember the tale, but hear his voice still, a well of dark water, a prayer. And I recall his hands, 2 measures of tenderness he laid against my face, the flames of discipline he raised above my head. Had you entered that afternoon, you would have thought you saw a man planting something in a boy's palm, a silver tear, a tiny flame. And had you followed that boy, you would have arrived here where I bend over my wife's right hand. Look how I shave her thumbnail down so carefully she feels no pain. Watch as I lift the splinter out. I was 7 when my father took my hand like this, and I did not hold that shard between my fingers and think, metal that will bury me, christen it little assassin, or going deep for my heart. And I did not lift up my wound and cry, death visited here. I did what a child does when he's given something to keep. I kissed my father. And it's so interesting, Penny, when I read what I wrote in 2003, here's part of what I wrote. The gift reminds me, let's see. It Amid these pressures, the gift reminds me that it is my responsibility to teach students more than how to underline an adjective or identify a theme or bubble in an answer sheet. There is a deeper curriculum, much like the father in the poem who passes on compassion and tenderness to his son. I like to think that when I teach, I will be sharing some of these gifts with my students, the same gifts I received from the fine teachers in my life. And I just think to go into a classroom today and work with kids, that's the gift. You know, that's the gift that you're giving kids. It's such a difficult time.
I would agree. I spent about half an hour on the phone with one of my good friends from the high school I left here in town. And she said that just closing her door and having a conversation with her kids and really listening, just to hear them, she knew was the important work of her day yesterday. And that is, we can create such a net of safety in our classrooms for all kids, but also in really hard times. So my poem is much lighter. It's a favorite of mine. It reminds me, because I'm such a dog lover, of raising kids with dogs. Do You Love Me by Robert Wrigley. She's 12 and she's asking the dog, who does, but who speaks in tongues, whose feints and gyrations are themselves parts of speech. They're on the back porch, and I don't really mean to be taking this in, but once I heard, I can't stop listening. Again and again, she asks, and the good dog sits and wiggles, leaps and licks. Imagine never asking. Imagine why. So sure you wouldn't dare or couldn't care less. I wonder if the dog's guileless brown eyes can lie, if the perfect canine lack of abstractions might not be a bit like the picture books she read as a child before her parents' lips shaped the daily miracle of speech and kisses. And the words were not lead and weighed only air and did not mean so meanly. Do you love me? She says and says, until the dog, sensing perhaps its own awful speechlessness, tries to bolt, but she holds it by the collar and will not let go until, having come closer, I hear the rest of it. I hear it all. She's got the dog's furry jowls in her hands. She speaks precisely into its laid back, quivering ears. Say it, she hisses. Say it to me.
Oh boy. I love that.
Yeah, there's a lot.
That.
Yeah. Yeah. Fabulous.
You know, and I turn to my dog a lot in times like these, you know, just that unbridled joy.
A lot of comfort from a canine.
Yeah.
But one strategy that I think is worth sharing with teachers today that is always a part of studying poetry in my class is that we will gather up all the leftover poems in the room. And, you know, you have a few copies of this and a few copies of that. And I'll say, choose one that you love, find a kid or two to work with you, and then create a multi-voice poem. And that means that some of the lines you read together, some you read on your own. And listening to them practice, listening to them imagine alternative ways to share a poem is just terrific. And there's no grade. It's just we're going to close class with some of these being shared. So you and I together put together one, trying it. I mean, we're still stumbling through just like kids do.
5 minutes ago. And we want to say, as we read this together, or parts of it together, we find that it might be a little technological lag in time. So we hope it syncs well enough for you to get the effect of it. Of course, wouldn't do that in a classroom.
Right, absolutely. So a collection of poetry that is certainly helping me, The Path to Kindness, poems of connection and joy. It's the second collection edited by James Cruz from Vermont. The first one, How to Love, or poems, I can't remember, but they're both terrific and they both look like this little size you can carry around. Any rate, the poem is by Danusha Lamaris, who wrote both Bonfire Opera and The Moons of August, two collections of poetry. But I wanted to read a little bit from her introduction to this collection before we do her poem in two voices. Try. Many of us have faced times when life felt impossible to bear until a friend texted, or the barista at our favorite coffee shop started chatting with us. Because the sparks of connections like this last for just a few minutes, we might lose heart, believing that what little we can give to each other will have no lasting effect on a world that feels so broken and divided. But my hope is that as you read through the poems gathered here, you will see kindness, not just as a spontaneous act that happens on its own, but as a practice of noticing and naming the many moments of tenderness we witness, give, and receive throughout our days. These poems retrained me to seek out and find connection at a time when so many of us have grown more isolated. She says, poetry is an ideal tool in times of uncertainty and change in our lives because it grounds us in the now, opening our hearts and minds to the world's outside and within. And so, no surprise, her poem is called Small Kindnesses.
And it goes like this. I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by.
Or how strangers still say, bless
you,
when someone sneezes, a leftover from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we are saying.
And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up.
Mostly, we don't want to harm
each other.
We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it. To smile at them. And for them to smile back.
For the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder.
And for the driver in the red pickup truck to let us pass. We have so little of each other
now. So far from tribe, only these brief moments of exchange.
What if they are the true dwelling of the holy? These fleeting temples we make together when we say,
here, have my seat.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You first.
You first.
I like your hat. Small kindnesses from the path to kindness.
Love that.
Yeah, and I will take a picture of our notes on it just because that's what my kids do. You highlight who's speaker one, who's speaker two, and what are you trying to say together. One way to co-survive these hard times is to read poetry.
Thank you for joining us today and bearing with us as, like you, we are, processing the events of this week, and just know that we're thinking about you and sending our, best wishes as you get your kids, through the end of this school year.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for being teachers, for being people to believe in.
Take care.
Yes.